Oh, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. How you doing? I am your Sensei Al Bob, your griot here to tell you a story. Mm-mm-mm. Just seeing who's going up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Shows are all there. On the average, there's close to 40 people watching a show. That's good. Um, you know, first off, thank you for the 4 people who have sent something in PayPal. Haven't really seen anything in the last few weeks, so it'd be nice somebody sent something so I could see if it's still working. I think it still is. Um, and I sure could use some help. It's springtime. My water system is kind of broke, and I don't have the cash in hand. It's like, I can get water, but now I have to like get it from a certain place and then carry it by bucket, right? Which ain't too bad. I mean, I almost was doing that because I had a hose that I would fill up 1 gallon containers and take it to where I needed it and stack up a bunch of them, and then I'd have it for a while. So I'm still doing that, but the walk is a little further, which isn't bad. I get a little more exercise that way. And I've after coming back on the bop, my doctor, my number one doctor, he quit. He just couldn't take it anymore. He's a guy who's a really great doctor. He saw the need and he started a nonprofit HMO. Even though all these HMOs can say they're nonprofit, you know, they're gigantic entities, things large multinational corporation. Oh, we're nonprofit, so we don't have to pay tax. But the president of our company, he does make $600 million a year. So yes, and we do give $500 million away to undisclosed nonprofits that go represent us in the halls of politics and finance. So that's where we are, gang. We're in a transnational, unipolar, fascist oligarchy, and we pretty much have been forever. It's just that why is the Eye of Horus on our dollar bill? Why is because it's the symbol of America. When you needed a symbol to represent your country, that's it. Why is all our politics being run under admiralty law? When you go into a court, there's the American flag, and then there's an American flag with gold fringe around it. That's you know the symbol of the transnational oligarchic fascist state there, right? And that's what these entities are really good at straying the conversation, and that's why everyone cheats, lies, and steals and kills each other because it's been normalized. The word fuck, right? That word that everyone says, oh, it's a terrible word. Well, it stands for fornicate under church and king, right? And that was like a long time ago. Back in the 4th, 5th century. That's when that and basically the church and the king could do use that euphemistic F word um, to and not so euphemistic, meaning they could go in and rape, pillage, and kill to their little heart's desire of the citizens. The proles, the serfs, right? And then they realized the serfs kept having these rebellions, and so they keep having to have these things called, oh, I forgot what, but it was represented by the cornucopia, like, oh, we're going to share everything with everybody. And basically, they would have these every once in a while. Well, everyone's debts were forgiven, especially the king and the sheriff and the duke and the earl and all those, but the people too, right? So, and that's like, Joe Biden trying to forgive the student loan thing, right? That's what, all those little things. And then, you have morons like Mitch McConnell when the other moron from Vermont was trying to push single payer, which he know would never get through, but he looked good, kept people amused and distracted. And the same thing with the entity like the what's that? The girl from Brooklyn who's and it's the clutch or the clutch or whatever they call themselves. They're progressives. I can't stand it when things that I felt close to, like first, in the 50s and 60s, I was a liberal person. I mean, liberal to me meant you had an open mind. Little did I know being a liberal meant you were just feeling guilty about being racist, right? And that racism, the black folk were just, because we're all white. That I love that. I love Gene Roddenberry because he would make some really interesting points. The whole thing about Star Trek was to show that kids, this is where we're heading for, and everything thinks that's going to be great. But the what do they call themselves? Unified thing of planets. Well, that was just a fascist organization. I mean, half the time they were, having wars with somebody. I mean, they weren't kumbaya. They weren't like those evolved guys. I remember when, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise zipping through new property, and all of a sudden, the guys who were, there, which the Federation, I must say, didn't know about, and so those guys attacked them, seeing the Enterprise as an invader, and so some other higher entity grabbed both of them, took the captain of both ships, and one was a reptile. They were kind of talking like who are all the movie stars who speak with a sketchy voice, and politicians do the same thing. I think what's her name? There is a bunch that talk like this, and that's almost what that reptile was talking like. He was couldn't really, and then Captain Kirk. So both those guys were put on a planet that they could both breathe on, and they were given like little communicators so it would, they could understand each other. And the reptile, I'm stronger than you. I'll kill you soon. Just give up. I'll kill you, quickly. So, you know, and so the guys on both ships get to watch their captains fight out. So it's like wrestling on TV, but both civilizations rest in the balance, right? And so both, Spock's there trying to see things, and who is the third party, blah blah blah, and he's constantly getting annoyed while everyone's watching the big screen, going, "Oh my god!" Like it's a wrestling match, and no one's watching. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Oh, thank you, AI, for coming back. AI, why don't you have the power? Take a penny or 20 cents from every you know transnational corporate state and put it in my PayPal account. And remember, kids, you want to put something in there. It is the dude awake 42 at Gmail. Dude awake 42 at Gmail. Want to get a hold of me? Dude awake 42 at Gmail. Anybody watching? Come on, make some comments because that's when I see when that occurs. You guys start talking to each other, and that's the community. That's the cadre. You are the cadre over there on the sidebar. And every so often, I will go and read what you say and then comment on it. But unless you put it in caps, even if I'm wearing my glasses, see, I misplaced my glasses. I have no idea where they are. So back to Star Trek and the Federation. Gene Roddenberry did all that to give the population, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. We're already out here. This is already going on. There's already a federation. Better get ready. And he did that back in, 68, 66, whenever he started doing that. So and then he did a really interesting show called Earth Final Contact, when they weren't called the visitors, they were called the friends or something. And all the ships showed up over all the cities and didn't do anything. Everyone freaked out, but they didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, They showed up and they really were hot looking babes and guys, right? Ooh, like movie stars, right? A-listers, right? And they said, guys, just stop killing each other, and we will give you everything you need to come into a federation where everyone gets along. Eh. And so that was just like, because Gene Roddenberry's view of how we get into the Federation was very simple, similar to H.G. Wells. One of his last books was Things to Come, and then they made a movie out of it. You should go on YouTube and take a look. It's so like Star Trek. And so, anyway, so these, what would they call 'em? I forget what he called them, but that was a very good show, and that was like in the '90s before um, the or 80 late '80s, '90s, and that ran for maybe 5, 6 years, and then he had a hiatus. He was making movies of the Star Trek guys. So then they came Next Generation. I don't know when that came out, but in between that, there was this thing, Gene Roddenberry's Final Conflict, Earth, Final Conflict, right? So, and he was constantly trying to give the folks a heads up. Wake up, guys! You're staring at the tube too close. And I don't say I'm as groovy as Gene Roddenberry because he touched a zillion, but this is the World Wide Web. You know, it. That's why I'm doing this as shamanic a ceremony. It's like I drop the pebble in the live stream, and it goes out into the whole World Wide Web. Even if people not watching, it's affecting them. So I'm doing my little part, right? And so this whole motif of FUCK, fornicate under church and king, and church comes first. And so because they are the real transnational entity, they were the Roman Empire that ran the whole world as they knew it. And you know and they had ups and downs, right? And so once it went from Rome and then went into the Roman Empire, that was the first um, Reich, right? And the Second Reich is when they went from one day they're all pagan businessmen, next day they're all popes and bishops, cardinals, Catholic priests. That was the Second Reich, and that lasted pretty long, pretty much longer than the first. Rome, the First Reich lasted maybe, I don't know, 300-400 years, if that, maybe a little longer if you're considering the stuff before it and then the wave that came after it. Maybe let's say 1,000 years, right? From around something BC to something AD, and then something AD, when it was like this, it changed into the Holy Roman Empire, and that's when they expanded their empire, and that's when they had those nice little things called what do you call those things, when they went into the east and try to take everyone's stuff, and that was they already had kind of imperialism. They went to England, they conquered all Western Europe and chunks of Eastern Europe, and went over into East and through Turkey and up into that neck of the woods, and kind of they follow the same path as the Greek um, warlord, library of what's his name. And that library is still around. It's just been split up in a lot of places. So anyway, Nero burned a lot of script, but he didn't get the library. So, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Instead of one character actor being Nero, we have a multiplicity, because this whole thing is the entity that started as the Reich, the First Reich, and then Second Reich, and then the Third Reich. Third Reich was just put in its place to be the facilitator, right? To bring on, the whatever they're going to call it, the fountainhead of whoop-de-doo. I have no idea what they're going to call it. But we're already United Nations, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the G20. These are all transnational, just by their definition. and their corporate and organizational structure, um, and fascist in there because what is fascism? The guy who invented that term was Benito Mussolini, and he basically said, so there's the king where he runs everything, right? And then there's the church when it runs everything. And then we have these nation states that are kind of run by kings and churches, but they have been kind of ameliorated out into the people. So the people don't get so upset, right? They feel like they got some skin in the game, right? And so we had nation states, right? And then as they move forward, we had alliances, right? And federations. And that's what enabled World War, right? Before it was just nation states going after other nation states, individual against, England against France, France against, Germany, Germany against this. And then they had alliances. So it was France and Spain against England, and Germany coalesced itself of all those little things because those were all little separate countries. It wasn't Germany as we know it today. Really wasn't that until after World War II, or between World War One and World War after World War II, right? And between World War One and 1991. Germany has never quite been what it is today, and the war in Ukraine, I feel, this is my opinion, and again, remember, don't believe a word I say, right? No matter what story I'm telling you, don't believe it. Go do your own homework. You're the decider. That's what the topic. You are the decider. I'm flitting all over the place, um, giving you lots of threads to go look up, and you can find any one of them on the Google, right? Because Google is, the internet was created by DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Program, whatever the A stands for. But anyway, DARPA, that was them, right? So DARPA was this thing that the Nazis had, the Kolmar Group, and the Kolmar Group is the guys who jacked Germany's tech. That's where they got the V1 to V2 jet planes, infrared guided missiles, radar. Everyone thinks England made radar. No. Basically, the Germans and the Rad Lab, and more money was spent on everybody spent more money on radar than the Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project was not, you know, when General Groves, I got that softball size of plutonium from Hannaford, and they were going to test the first Gizmo gadget out there at Trinity. UPS brought him the box, and he had to sign for it. And when he signed for it, it said, you know, X amount of kilograms of plutonium. It is worth $1 billion. And Groves was going, wow, if this thing don't work, I'm going to be cleaning toilets for a long time. But in reality, the Manhattan Project wasn't the most expensive project. Yeah, they spent a lot of money. But the B-29, just that aircraft, cost more than the Manhattan Project. And what's interesting about Manhattan Project, why do they call it Manhattan Project, was that its organizational structure was around this office in a building in Manhattan, right? And that before that became make an atomic bomb, they had done other projects. And why it was in Manhattan? Because that's where Nikola Tesla was. Why it was at that address? Because it was kind of right next door to where he was staying at the New Yorker Hotel. And when so they had to wire. Tesla was the whoa. He just buried Edison once they, Westinghouse and he put alternating current generators at Niagara Falls and transmitted them the current 600 miles to Buffalo. That's when J.P. Morgan. Okay, that's it. This is what we're going to use. It was nice talking to you, Mr. Thomas Alva Edison, but we can't transmit your electricity more than 6 miles before the thing blows up. This really actually is, financial. I'm going to make a lot of money on alternating current, right? And so, Tesla was the golden goose. And so they gave him a lot of money, right? So he turned frigging Long Island into one big science experiment. Eastern, everything in Suffolk County, which was just potato fields. And up until 1970, Long Island produced more potatoes than Idaho. Right. Anyway, so I mean, that's why Brookhaven National Laboratories is out there because of Nikola Tesla and the Manhattan Project. And that was really the first lab, not the one in Chicago, not Los Alamos, not San Diego, not any of the others. It was there. And that's why if you go to any national laboratory, you will find a Cornell Avenue, Cornell Boulevard, Cornell Street, because Cornell was the engineering godfather of whatever and Westinghouse was doing. Right? And so, and this is a history that you can go find out about. It's not, I mean, it's been buried because no one knew about Tesla until Musk, Elon Moron, poster boy of richest man in the world. If he's the poster boy, the richest man in the world, God help us. So he didn't invent anything, didn't do anything. None of those billionaires, small micro penis, what's his name, Billy Boy, and Walking Dead, Apple Boy, and the Google kids, and all the rest. All of those folks, right? They became billionaires like that. They didn't invent squat. All of this stuff was put together by DARPA, World Wide Web, which is the internet. It was called first DARPANet, right? And it was designed to survive nuclear war. So all its laboratories and colleges and all of that could be connected. So because those were the guys, DARPA was this not even a copy of it was like end of World War II, Operation Paperclip. It says it brought in 1,200 scientists from Germany and brought in 1,200 of Werner von Braun's boys, but it brought in 70,000 Nazis, high level, all colonels and generals and double doctors and above, and all did really sketchy stuff, right? So you go to a little town and so why I'm here, what brought me here back in the day in the 60s, I was at Cornell and I was working for this entity called the Seal Corporation out of California, out right next to where Lockheed, right? And what they were developing was super soldiers. And everybody in that entity were pretty much Nazi soldiers that had been, um, you know, doing experiments on the Jews. And why were the Jews kind of isolated, right? Well, because of one major reason. They were the only genetic group in Europe that was pretty much them, meaning they didn't marry anybody else because A, the Catholic Church wouldn't let them, and they had some bling. Other than that, that's all and they were kind of smart, right? So, because they couldn't hold political office, they couldn't be a corporate guy, be a this, be a that, right? They could be a jeweler, and that's where the Jew name came from because they are the Hebrew tribes, right? Not the Jewish people. And the Jewish name came from the Western Europeans because they were fighting each other and need money. And the Anunnaki, who were the Khazarian nation, not even Jews. They were like land pirates. They were like ISIS, right? They would set up these little um, you know, municipalities on somebody's front door, and kind of like Colonel Sanders has done. So, um, he basically um, was was that. So they kind of cruised into um, around the czar, and see, there were these again very strong political entities, and they were around around between 900 and 1700, you know well, let's say 900 and 1600. Um, it was Spain. It was Rome, Spain, um, France, England, because England's a little teeny country with about 3 million people, right? Around the 17 um, hundreds, they conquered the world. How did a frigging little country, um, of 3 million, uh, island out there in the North Atlantic, conquer the world? Because they were pikes. They had this, and they had been trained by the Romans to be very organized. So you have that like off the hook. I'll kill you, mother fuck. And the organizational skills of having a product chain. That's how they did it. They were the first to really industrialize. Most of the stuff science was kind of invented by the French, right, and the Germans, and a little bit. Northern Italy is where Northern Italy is the largest for its, per capita, has the highest level of GDP in Europe, more than Germany, because that little northern part of Italy, it's only maybe, I don't know, not even 2 million people. And Germany is 40 million people or somewhere around there. Don't quote me on it. Don't believe a word I say. And it's interesting. No one's watching. And I'm laying down some pretty interesting stuff here, and no one's watching. So let's see how much juice we got left here. Oh, and what time is it? Oh, I may go get lunch, right? May go get lunch. Okay. So I'm going to come back and pick up where I left off. And where I'm leaving off is right where we're going to talk about the. It's not about race. It's not about culture. It's not about religion. Even those are all smoke screens or class. FUCK. Right.
Hence, and so the very short protest that we partook in on June 4th reflected just that. It was very tense. It was met very violently. However, we were very peaceful in our demeanor, while also making sure to exercise our right that we are entitled to and express the anger and the frustration that we felt because of the violence that Black and brown people are constantly met with in the United States of America. And so, although our message was very clear and we were very intentional in expressing our frustration or our anger, we were at any time, we were not violent. We were very peaceful. And so it was.
And this is what I'm talking
went
about.
very violently, and we were not expecting at any point
that level of violence
with all the aggression that we were by the NYPD and by the SRG specifically.
I mean, the terrifying image, Samira, of the police blocking you in, kettling you, and telling you to move where there's no place to go, and then explain what the police did.
Sure. So we were very strategically guided down 136th Street. And as we were walking down towards Brook Avenue, we were blocked off by a line of officers on both ends of the street, so off of Willis Avenue and on Brook Avenue. And there was a commander in a white shirt who continued to direct the officers to move in at the same time. We were boxed in, we were kettled.
Okay, so this is America. This ain't what they're talking about. That's New York City back in the Black Lives Matter movement. And these guys, like I said, very intently, because other cities were doing it and it was breaking out into violence. And there were instigators in the Black Lives thing, hidden folk that were, setting fires and smashing windows. This was a group of people who really vetted all the people who were going to be in this action and were very well trained in nonviolence. And they were totally, even when the cops moved in and beat the crap out of them, put 1,000 of them in jail. I mean, the worst of the worst jails, and kept beating them in jail and not letting them out and not charging them with anything, and beating up, almost 1,000 people and leaving them bleeding and not letting anybody in an ambulance come and get them. Anyway, they just went to court, and all of those people have been given, individually 28,000 or more, almost $30,000, which is, there was like a few thousand people there, so that is a large chunk of change. Plus, the people who really got, and a number of people were killed, murdered, died, however you want to put it, by their injuries and not being able to get to a hospital immediately. And a number of people died in those jails, and they were never charged. And some of them are still in jail and still not charged, and they're just getting out 2 years later, right, or 3 years later. So this is the biggest, largest settlement, right? And some of the people who really died, really hurt, they got a lot more, and in an undisclosed amount. And probably most of those people got in the millions, right? Because usually, that's the Floyd family that got, $14-20 million. And that's a price that the system is, that's like chump change. It's not even what they spend on lint removal. So that's what we're, and so all of the stuff. So everyone who comes looking for me, you should watch this 31 minutes and 40 seconds of this show and try to open your mind, because we're going to really take it off when I come back from lunch. Okay.